All right, first up tonight, score one for the Dubs. You've heard warnings about inflation for what feels like forever. You've heard them from politicians. You've heard them from the ads telling you to buy gold. You've even heard my own mea culpa because there hasn't happened any inflation. Turns out that Janet Yellen and other inflation dubs on the Fed had it right. Important new Wall Street Journal study shows that Yellen and New York Fed head William Dudley were the best forecasters for the past 4 years. And inflation hawks like James Bullard, Charles Plosser, and Jeffrey Lacker, they were wrong. They had the worst forecasting records. All right, so one question is, does this strengthen Yellen's case to be the next Fed chair? Let's ask Peter Schiff. He's the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. And we go to Scott Sumner. We welcome him to the show for the first time. He's professor of economics at Bentley University. And Professor Sumner is the leader of the new Market Monetarist School. Scott Sumner, I want to begin with you because everyone was talking about the printing press money, the $3 trillion plus that the Fed injected into its balance sheet and presumably into the financial markets, but the inflation never showed up. Why, Scott, in your judgment, why did the printing press money not show up?
Well, that's basically because when interest rates fall close to zero, you can put a lot of money into the system and it doesn't have much inflationary effect. This is especially true because they started paying interest on reserves back in October 2008. That further encouraged banks to hold on to the money. So historically, when countries get near zero interest rates, inflation generally stays low despite a lot of money injection.
How far can they go, Scott? I want to get Peter Schiff into this. But how far can they go? I mean, would you advocate that the Fed continue quantitative easing and bond buying in order to expand the economy?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, I would. I think that's a good policy, but an even better policy would be to set some explicit target for, say, nominal GDP growth and use that as a way to sort of steer monetary policy. But QE is better than nothing.
All right, Peter Schiff, QE is better than nothing. The inflation never panned out. Janet Yellen wins the forecasting prize. I gave a mea culpa, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago and said, guess what? There is no inflation, at least as reported. What's your take on this, Peter? Because the inflation story never panned out.
Well, I'm still waiting for your next mea culpa. Maybe the only reason she hit the dartboard is because somebody moved the board in the path of her dart. You know, when the Fed monetized $3 trillion worth of mortgages and treasuries, by definition, that is inflation. Quantitative easing is just a euphemism for inflation. We're talking about the effect of inflation when we talk about rising prices. We already have rising real estate prices. We have rising stock prices. Inflation has caused that. But I believe consumer prices are also rising much faster than the government admits. We're hiding behind these CPI numbers, which have been reverse engineered to come up with a low number. But if you actually look at what's happening to consumer prices, not what the government tells you is happening, but what is actually happening, prices are rising a lot faster. And so Yellen is wrong. There is inflation, and it's going to get even worse. And part of the reason that we're not feeling it is that we're exporting a lot of it. We send countries like China our paper money, and they send us their goods. And so money flows out and goods come in, and that temporarily keeps a lid on prices that are already rising faster than the government admits. But pretty soon those flows are going to reverse, and our money's going to come back, and prices go through the roof.
Scott Sumner, I don't see what's wrong with that. All that is just a bunch of free trade with China. And again, Scott, I go to you. All right, you heard Peter Schiff say there is inflation. We just don't see the inflation. All right?
No,
how does a market monetarist react to that?
That's just not right. Even if you look at private estimates like the Billion Prices Project, which looks at internet prices, they get roughly the same estimate of the CPI. And also, if it were really true that inflation was a lot higher, say 4 or 6%, that would mean real GDP growth would be that much lower, 0 or -2. And that would totally conflict with the employment numbers and everything else. So there's no way there could be a conspiracy to change the inflation numbers without throwing everything else off course.
You know, it's actually the reverse. If I'm right, then the economy has been in a recession for the entirety of the Obama presidency. And that makes a lot more sense to me. The reason it feels like a recession to so many people is because it is. The labor force is contracting. We're using a lot less energy now than we were years ago when the economy was supposedly smaller. And